The galaxy had long known the Zalari. They were beings of light and grace, taller than any human could imagine, with eyes that glowed like stars and voices that carried authority. To the civilizations scattered across countless planets, the Zalari were not just advanced, they were gods. Their presence brought peace, and their guidance shaped entire societies. Cities were built in their honor, monuments were carved to capture their likeness, and laws were written following their unseen wisdom. Humans, however, were different. On the remote planet of Vera, far from the centers of Zalari influence, humans lived simply. They built homes from stone and metal, and they dreamed not of worshipping gods, but of exploring the stars. Their curiosity burned brighter than their fear. When the first Zalari ship appeared in Veran skies, a silver and radiant craft that shimmered like liquid light, the people did not tremble. They watched. They wondered. Commander Reyna Sethi stood at the edge of Vera's cliff, her eyes scanning the ship as it descended. Unlike other species who bowed and knelt when Zalari arrived, Reyna's team stood upright, hands relaxed at their sides. "They're beautiful," whispered Lieutenant Amir, a young officer with more courage than experience. "But they're not gods to me." Reyna nodded. "No, they are beings of power, yes, but we are alive. That alone makes us something they do not expect." When the Zalari finally stepped onto Vera's ground, their presence was overwhelming. Each movement seemed deliberate, their gestures slow and perfect. They spoke in a tone that resonated deep inside the chest, yet Reyna felt no fear, only curiosity. The leader of the Zalari, a figure known as Elithar, extended a hand, not as a command, but as a greeting. "Humans," Elithar said, his voice both melodic and firm. "We come to guide you, to protect you, to help you flourish." Reyna stepped forward, her boots crunching on the stone. "And if we wish to walk our own path?" she asked boldly. Elithar's glowing eyes narrowed, but not in anger. "Then you will face challenges you are not ready for." The humans did not bow. They did not kneel. They did not submit. They asked questions. They examined the Zalari technology. They tested boundaries. The Zalari, who had never known resistance so direct, were intrigued. Other species might have worshipped blindly, but humans were persistent. They were fearless in ways that made even Elithar pause. Weeks passed, and humans began to explore the Zalari's gifts. Simple tools became instruments of learning. Ships capable of traveling faster than light were studied, mapped, and understood, not copied blindly, but adapted. Reyna and her team learned to interface with Zalari technology, discovering patterns and principles that the Zalari themselves assumed were beyond human comprehension. In the great halls of Elithar's ship, humans debated and questioned. They challenged the rules, they asked why to every command, and they refused to accept rituals as absolute. Their curiosity was aflame, unextinguished even by awe. The Zalari observed, fascinated. No species had ever dared to act this way. "Why do they question everything?" asked Elithar to his council. "Do they not fear us?" "They are different," replied an elder Zalari, voice like silver wind. "They see the world not as it is, but as it could be. That is dangerous and remarkable." Dangerous. Elithar considered the word carefully. He had maintained order across galaxies, enforced peace where rebellion might have arisen. Yet these humans, they did not fear. They did not obey blindly. They learned, adapted, and, most unsettling, they taught one another quickly. On Vera, humans began building small ships of their own, inspired by Zalari designs. Their engineers reverse-engineered the energy cores, creating propulsion systems humans had only dreamed of. Scientists studied energy shields, communication devices, and even Zalari medicine. Slowly, they understood principles the Zalari assumed were too advanced to grasp. It was not just knowledge humans sought, it was mastery. Humans were not content to admire. They wanted to create, to explore, to push limits. And every attempt, every experiment, revealed that human ingenuity was boundless. One night, under Vera's twin moons, Reyna and her team gathered around a new ship they had built. A small vessel, modest compared to the Zalari craft, but fully functional. The hum of its engines was music to their ears. "It works," said Amir, eyes wide with excitement. "We did it," Reyna smiled. "Yes, but this is only the beginning. We're learning their ways. Soon, we'll understand more than anyone thought possible." Word of humans' progress spread. Other civilizations, previously devoted to the Zalari, began to watch with unease. How could these fragile beings, so young in the galaxy, make strides that took others centuries? It was unheard of. Humans' audacity was frightening. Back on Elithar's ship, tension grew. "They are no longer merely observers," said another Zalari. "They are learners, and learners, when driven, become challengers." Elithar remained silent, considering this carefully. For the first time, he felt the weight of uncertainty. Every plan, every prediction, every assumption about humans had failed. They were unpredictable, fearless, and relentless in curiosity. Meanwhile, humans faced their own challenges. Some argued caution, warning against provoking beings of unimaginable power. Others, like Reyna, argued that humanity's strength lay in its will, its creativity, and its refusal to accept limits. They disagreed at times, but these disagreements only strengthened them. They learned to think differently, to strategize, and to work as one, not under command, but in mutual respect. As the weeks turned into months, humans' presence shifted the balance. Where other species bowed to the Zalari, humans built bridges of understanding. Where others submitted, humans questioned. And through this, humans discovered something unexpected. The Zalari, despite their godlike powers, were fallible. They had blind spots, and humans' determination illuminated them. The first hint of future conflict came quietly. While humans studied, experimented, and explored, the Zalari began to retreat from certain areas, adjusting patrols, restricting access to some of their most powerful devices. Humans noticed these changes, documenting them, discussing them, and wondering why such beings would alter their behavior so subtly. "Do you think they fear us?" Amir asked one evening, looking at the glowing horizon of Elithar's retreating ship. Reyna shook her head. "Not fear. Curiosity and caution. They see potential in us, but they do not yet understand it." Indeed, humans' defiance was not rooted in arrogance, but in survival and understanding. They were not bowing, but neither were they hostile, yet. They were learning. And learning, as history would show, was humanity's greatest weapon. By the end of Part 1, humanity had reached a tipping point. They were no longer the timid species from a remote planet. They were explorers, thinkers, learners, and, unbeknownst to them yet, the first sparks of a revolution that could shake the galaxy. The Zalari, revered as gods for millennia, had finally encountered a species that would never kneel. And in that meeting of curiosity and power, a silent question hung over the galaxy. Could humans, with their simple bodies and simple beginnings, one day challenge the beings that were worshipped as gods? The answer, the galaxy would soon learn, was not just yes, it was inevitable. The humans of Vera were no longer just a curiosity to the Zalari. They had become a puzzle, a challenge, and a hint of danger. Commander Reyna Sethi knew this well. Every day brought new lessons, and every lesson brought new possibilities. The humans had learned to operate Zalari ships, understand their energy systems, and even manipulate the simplest weapons. Yet Reyna understood that knowledge alone would not be enough. To truly face the Zalari, humans would need courage, creativity, and unity. Reyna gathered her team in the control room of their research vessel, the Endeavor. The ship was small, built from reverse-engineered Zalari technology, but it was powerful enough to survive a brief encounter within Zalari patrol. Its walls hummed softly with energy cores that glowed like soft suns. "Today," Reyna said, her voice steady, "we begin the first tests outside Vera's orbit. We know their patrols, we know their defenses. We also know their weaknesses, but we must be careful. One mistake, and we could lose everything." Lieutenant Amir leaned forward, excitement in his eyes. "We've studied every patrol route, Every sensor pattern. I think we're ready, Commander. They won't see us coming. Perhaps, Reyna said with a hint of a smile. But remember, we are learning from the best, and the best can adapt faster than we imagine. The humans' plan was simple, but daring. Using stealth technology adapted from Zalari ships, they would navigate the edge of a major Zalari supply route. Their goal was not to attack. It was to gather intelligence, to understand the Zalari's true power and response patterns. As the Endeavor moved through the dark expanse of space, every crew member felt a thrill of fear and anticipation. Stars flashed past like diamonds, scattered across a black velvet sky. The ship's sensors picked up faint energy signatures, Zalari patrols moving in precise, silent lines. Humans had studied these for months, and now they would test their theories. When the first patrol appeared, the crew held their breath. The Zalari vessel shimmered with an aura of light, massive and elegant. It moved with the certainty of absolute power, its weapons dormant but unmistakably deadly. "Hold steady," Reyna whispered. "We are invisible to them. Let's see how long that lasts." For a tense hour, the Endeavor slipped past the patrols, silent and unseen. The crew felt exhilaration. They had done what many believed impossible. But the thrill came with a warning. The Zalari noticed anomalies, small fluctuations in energy signatures, and the ship's captain knew they were not fully invisible. Suddenly, a warning flashed on the console. A second patrol had detected the faint ripple of their ship's engines. The humans reacted quickly, adjusting energy fields and rerouting power to shields. The Zalari patrol slowed, sensing something unusual, but the humans had already vanished into the darkness of space. "We need to move faster," Amir said. "They'll be coming after us." Reyna nodded. "Agreed. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." This was the first taste of rebellion. Humans, small and untested, had dared to challenge the Zalari's control, even in a minor way, and the Zalari, though not angered, were puzzled. They had never faced a species that could learn so fast, think so creatively, and act with such daring. Back on Vera, scientists and engineers worked day and night, refining ships, studying patterns, and building new technology. Humans were no longer just students. They were innovators. Every failure became a lesson. Every success a step towards something greater. "It's amazing," said Dr. Leora, a scientist who had been studying Zalari energy systems for years. "They think they are untouchable, but we are learning, and every day we grow stronger." Reyna placed a hand on the table. "Yes, but strength alone is not enough. We need strategy, coordination, and patience. We are not gods. We are humans. And that is exactly why we can succeed." As humans continued their experiments, news of their progress began to spread. Other species, loyal to the Zalari, watched in disbelief. How could a small, primitive species accomplish feats that took centuries for others to achieve? Fear began to spread. Meanwhile, the Zalari convened in the crystal halls of their central starship. Elithar, the leader, spoke to his council. "Humans are no longer simply curious," he said. "They test limits, defy rules, and adapt faster than expected. We must consider what they might become if we do nothing." An elder Zalari spoke. "They are still young, fragile, and inexperienced. But their persistence, it is unlike anything we have seen. They could be a threat, or they could be nothing. We cannot predict." Elithar remained silent, watching the stars through the transparent walls of the hall. For the first time in millennia, he felt uncertainty. On Vera, Ryena's team continued their training. They ran simulations of Zalari combat, practiced evasive maneuvers, and learned to work together under pressure. They were small, yes, but they were clever. And cleverness, they realized, could level the playing field against power. One night, Reyna called her officers together. "We've learned a lot, but knowledge alone will not win battles. We need to trust each other, and we need to trust ourselves. This galaxy may fear us, or it may ignore us, but that does not matter. What matters is that we are ready for what comes next." Their next mission would be dangerous, A reconnaissance run deep into Zalari-controlled space, near a planet known for its strategic energy reserves. Humans planned not to attack, but to observe, map defenses, and test human resilience. Every crew member knew the risks. As the Endeavour entered the unknown sector, sensors picked up energy fluctuations far greater than anything humans had studied. A massive Zalari fleet moved with precision and silence, patrolling the area. Reyna felt a thrill of fear, but she did not hesitate. Humans thrived on challenges. Fear was not an enemy. It was a guide. The humans executed their mission with skill, dodging detection, mapping fleet positions, and gathering critical data. Yet, in the final moments, a Zalari patrol nearly discovered them. For a tense hour, the crew held their breath as evasive maneuvers kept the ship safe. When they returned to Vera, the team erupted in quiet celebration. They had survived, learned, and proven their abilities. But more importantly, they had sent a message, not to the Zalari directly, but to the galaxy. Humans were not submissive, and they would not be controlled. That evening, Reyna walked along the cliffs, looking at the stars. Amir joined her. "Do you think they're afraid of us?" he asked. Reyna shook her head. "Not afraid, curious. They do not understand us yet, but they will. And when they do, the galaxy will change." Indeed, the spark of rebellion had been lit. Humans had not yet challenged the Zalari directly, but by learning, adapting, and surviving, they had begun the first steps toward a larger struggle. Other species began to whisper about the humans' bravery, skill, and persistence. Some were inspired, while others were cautious, fearing that the humans' rise might alter the balance of power. Meanwhile, the Zalari watched, puzzled and intrigued. They had never met a species like humans, bold, clever, unafraid. They had assumed that no species could question them, let alone challenge them. And yet, these humans had done so quietly, cleverly, and persistently. Elithar spoke to his council once more. "We cannot ignore them. They are small, yes, but they are dangerous. Not because they are strong, but because they are unyielding. And unyielding can topple gods." In the months that followed, humans continued to grow stronger, more coordinated, and more daring. They built ships, refined weapons, and shared knowledge. They trained not just for survival, but for mastery. Every mission, every experiment, every success and failure made them more than a species. They were becoming a force, one that the galaxy could not ignore. By the end of Part 2, humanity had taken the first steps toward a future that no one had imagined. They were no longer mere students in a galaxy ruled by gods. They were learners, explorers, and thinkers, challenging the impossible and proving that courage, creativity, and willpower could defy even the most powerful beings. And the spark that began as curiosity had grown into the first flame of rebellion. A rebellion that would one day shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. The galaxy had begun to whisper about humans. Small, fragile, and young compared to the ancient Zalari, they should have been insignificant. Yet reports of daring missions, clever strategies, and remarkable resilience spread quickly. Elithar, the Zalari leader, observed these developments with growing concern. Humans were not merely learning. They were challenging expectations, defying limits, and inspiring others. Commander Reyna Sethi stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, staring at the map of Zalari patrols and strategic positions. Her crew worked silently, coordinating movements and updating intelligence gathered over months. They were about to take a step further than any human had before. A coordinated strike against multiple Zalari installations, not to destroy, but to test defenses, provoke reactions, and learn. "This is dangerous," Lieutenant Amir said, voice low. "We could be destroyed in moments." Reyna turned to him, her expression firm but calm. "Yes, that is why we must be precise. Fear is natural, but it will not control us. We move as one, and we adapt. That is how humans survive where others fail." The plan was audacious. Small strike teams would target energy relays on 3 distant planets. These relays were crucial for Zalari communication and fleet coordination. Disabling them, even temporarily, would create confusion and give humans a rare opportunity to observe the Zolari's response. It was not an attack on life, it was a test of power, skill, and strategy. As the Endeavor and its fleet of human vessels entered Zolari-controlled space, tension ran high. Sensors picked up dozens of patrols, elegant ships moving with precision and discipline. Every human aboard knew the risks. One misstep and they could face annihilation. But fear was only a reminder of life, proof that they were still alive, still human, still capable. The first strike team approached their target quietly. Using stealth technology and careful navigation, they infiltrated the energy relay station on the barren planet of Therion. The station pulsed with Zolari energy, a glowing heart of power. Humans carefully disabled communication systems, redirecting energy flows and marking patterns. Every movement was calculated. Every moment could mean life or death. When the Zolari discovered the disruption, they acted quickly. Alethar ordered a fleet to investigate. Yet the humans were gone, leaving only a trace of their presence. The Zolari were powerful, fast, and precise, but humans were unpredictable. They moved like shadows, striking, learning, and vanishing before retaliation could be organized. On the Endeavor, Reyna monitored every team. "Status?" she asked. "Relay disabled," came a reply from Lieutenant Jin, a skilled tactician. "No casualties. Fleet movement's minimal. They are sending reinforcements, but we are ready." Reyna nodded. "Good. Prepare for extraction. Remember, observation is our goal. Knowledge is our weapon." As humans pulled back, Zolari commanders debated strategy. "These humans, they do not fear us," said one elder. "They are clever, but small. Surely they cannot sustain this." "They learn faster than expected," Alethar replied, "and they cooperate in ways no other species does. Their weakness is also their strength. They think, adapt, and endure. That is dangerous." The second strike targeted a massive energy hub on the planet Lysra, surrounded by a fleet of Zolari ships. Humans executed a coordinated approach, using clever diversions and energy shields to slip past patrols. They disabled the hub temporarily, forcing the Zolari to scramble resources and focus attention away from other sectors. The humans were precise, disciplined, and calm. Every action was a lesson in patience and strategy. Meanwhile, the galaxy watched. Other species, long devoted to the Zolari, began to question their allegiance. If humans could act so boldly and survive, perhaps the Zolari were not invincible. Rumors of human courage spread like wildfire. Entire civilizations began to whisper of resistance, inspired by humans' defiance. The final strike was the most daring. A team of elite human pilots approached the central Zolari command station on the planet Orveth. It was heavily guarded, a fortress of light and energy. Humans could not hope to destroy it, but they could test it, and they could survive. As they approached, Zolari sensors detected the incoming fleet. A wall of ships moved to intercept. The humans, trained for months, executed maneuvers the Zolari did not anticipate. They weaved between patrols, used stealth to confuse sensors, and relied on unpredictable strategies. Every move was calculated but flexible. "Keep steady," Reyna said. "Do not engage unless necessary. Remember, observation is our goal." The humans reached the central station and executed their plan, temporarily disrupting communications and mapping defensive patterns. For hours, they moved within a fortress that no species had ever entered unchallenged. When they withdrew, the Zolari realized that humans had not only survived, they had succeeded. Alethar was astonished. "They are small," he said to his council, "yet they are unstoppable in ways we cannot predict. They do not obey fear. They do not rely on power alone. They think, they adapt, they endure. And that is terrifying." Back on Vera, humans celebrated quietly. They had not conquered, they had learned. But the lessons they had gathered were invaluable. Every strategy, every response, every pattern of Zolari behavior was now in human hands. They had proven that brains, courage, and teamwork could challenge even the most powerful beings in the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, humans continued to expand their influence. Small, daring missions spread across Zalari-controlled space. Every success strengthened their confidence, and every near miss taught them humility. They learned not just to survive, but to thrive. As humans' reputation grew, so did their ambition. They no longer saw themselves as subjects in a galaxy ruled by gods. They were explorers, innovators, and thinkers. They were humans, undaunted, unyielding, and unbroken. On the Zalari side, tension increased. Patrols became stricter. Energy barriers were reinforced, and communication networks were monitored constantly. Yet the Zalari knew that their greatest threat was not strength. It was the human mind. Every new tactic, every bold maneuver, every clever deception highlighted a species that could not be predicted, controlled, or destroyed easily. In the heart of Zalari space, Elither faced a truth that had never before been considered. Humans were not inferior. They were not weak. They were strong in ways the Zalari had never valued, in courage, creativity, and perseverance. And that strength, when combined with the humans' unity and adaptability, could change the course of the galaxy. Meanwhile, humans on Vera trained tirelessly. They did not celebrate victories with arrogance. They celebrated lessons. Every mission brought understanding. Every challenge sharpened skills, and every success, small or large, made them bolder. "Do you realize what we've done?" Amir asked Reyna one evening, staring at the stars. Reyna smiled. "We have done what many thought impossible. We have shown the galaxy that humans do not kneel. That is the first step. The next steps will be harder, but we are ready." Indeed, humans had crossed a threshold. They had moved from curiosity to action, from learning to strategy, from survival to rebellion. The galaxy began to see them not as a minor species, but as a force to be reckoned with. Other civilizations whispered of their bravery, secretly inspired to rise. The Zalari, once untouchable, now faced a species that refused to bow, refused to submit, and refused to accept limits. The War of Gods had not yet begun in full. There were no massive battles, no destruction of worlds, and no final victory. But the spark had been lit. Humans had proven that courage, intelligence, and willpower could challenge beings that were worshipped as gods for millennia. And in that proof lay the power to change everything. By the end of Part 3, humans had transformed from observers into challengers. They were no longer students. They were participants in the unfolding drama of the galaxy. Their rebellion was quiet but unstoppable. The Zalari, for the first time in history, knew fear. Not fear of destruction, but fear of the unpredictable, of the unyielding, and of a species that refused to bow. And as the stars glimmered above Vera, Reyna looked toward the horizon, imagining a future where humans would stand not in the shadow of gods, but as equals, undaunted, unbroken, and unstoppable. The galaxy had changed. Whispers of human courage and cleverness spread across star systems, carrying tales of daring missions and impossible survival. Species that had once knelt to the Zalari now wondered if the so-called gods were truly invincible. And humans, small, untested, and young, stood at the edge of a new era, ready to shape the galaxy in ways no one had imagined. Commander Reyna Sethi knew the time had come. Humanity had learned, adapted, and survived. They had studied the Zalari's ships, weapons, and defenses. They had tested themselves in the shadows, striking, observing, and retreating when necessary. But now, the next step required courage of a different kind: confrontation. Not for conquest, but to claim their place among the stars as equals, not subjects. The plan was precise and daring. Human fleets would coordinate strikes on key Zalari strongholds, not to destroy life, but to disrupt command and seize knowledge. They would rely on strategy, speed, and unpredictability. Every vessel, every crew member, and every weapon would play a role in a calculated dance of skill and intelligence. As the Endeavor prepared to leave Vera, Reyna addressed her fleet. "We are not here to prove our strength through destruction. We are here to show that humans can think, adapt, and endure. That is our power. That is our message. Remember, Every action matters and every life counts. We move together, as one species, united. Lieutenant Amir stood beside her, scanning the starfield for Zilari patrols. "We've trained for this," he said. "We know their defenses, but still, it feels impossible." Reyna smiled. "It always feels impossible at first. That is the nature of courage. But we are humans. Impossible is not the end. It is the beginning." The first strike targeted the Zilari command hub on Orveth Prime. The planet was a fortress, its surface covered in towers of light and energy fields that pulsed like a heartbeat. Zilari patrols were constant, swift, and precise. Yet humans, using every lesson they had learned, approached with coordination and clever tactics. Stealth ships slipped between patrols, creating diversions that confused sensors. Small teams moved to disable communication arrays, mapping defense grids and leaving traces that would mislead the Zilari fleet. Every action was precise, yet unpredictable, a combination of calculation and intuition. When the Zilari responded, humans were ready. They had anticipated patterns, predicted reinforcements, and prepared contingencies. The battle was not one of brute force. It was a war of minds, a chess game played among the stars. Humans struck, observed, adapted, and struck again. For hours, the fleet maneuvered with skill and patience. Ships dodged energy beams, evaded interceptors, and completed their missions with minimal casualties. Every success brought not only information but confidence. Humans began to see themselves not as underdogs, but as equals capable of standing against beings once worshipped as gods. Meanwhile, Elithar convened his council. "Humans are unlike any species we have encountered," he said. "They do not fear us, they do not obey, and they adapt faster than our predictions. Their strength is not in their power, it is in their mind, their will, and their unity." An elder Zilari replied, "They are young, fragile, and small. Surely they cannot sustain this." Elithar shook his head. "That is exactly what makes them dangerous. Their persistence, their ingenuity, and their refusal to accept limits. These are weapons no force can predict." On Vera, Reyna's team coordinated the second strike. This time, their target was a massive Zilari energy reserve on the planet Lysra. Unlike previous missions, this required more than stealth. It demanded bravery. The reserve was guarded not only by ships, but by automated energy fields and defensive drones. Reyna addressed her team before the jump. "Remember, our goal is knowledge and survival. Precision is our strength. Courage is our shield. Trust each other, and trust yourselves." The fleet moved into position. Energy fields glowed like walls of light, and drones patrolled in unpredictable patterns. But humans were clever. They observed, adapted, and acted. Diversions split defenses, stealth modules created openings, and small teams disabled critical nodes. The Zilari, for all their power, could not predict the humans' ingenuity. By the end of the mission, the humans had gathered vital intelligence, mapping energy flows and fleet patterns, while suffering only minor losses. The message was clear. Humans could stand where others had fallen. They were not merely surviving. They were shaping the battlefield, forcing the Zilari to respond, adapt, and reconsider. In the heart of the galaxy, Elithar faced a truth he had long denied. Humans were no longer just curious learners. They were participants in the game of power. And their participation was changing everything. Reyna knew the final phase required not just strategy, but moral clarity. The last target was the central command station of the Zilari fleet, the place from which they had ruled countless worlds for millennia. Humans would not destroy it. They would not enslave or dominate. They would take knowledge, map defenses, and prove that courage, creativity, and unity could rival even the mightiest beings. The journey to the station was tense. Patrols were denser, energy barriers more powerful, and the stakes higher than ever. Yet humans moved with precision and confidence. Their years of preparation, experimentation, and observation had honed them into a force the Zilari had never anticipated. When they reached the station, humans executed their plan flawlessly. Stealth modules, synchronized strikes, and clever diversions allowed them to infiltrate key sections, For hours, they moved through halls and corridors, mapping systems, observing protocols, and learning from the very beings once called gods. When the mission ended, the humans withdrew with knowledge and experience, leaving the Zalari to wonder how such a small species had accomplished so much. Elithar himself watched the stars, realizing that humans had done more than challenge. They had changed the balance of the galaxy. Back on Vera, Reyna addressed her crew. "We have done what was once thought impossible. We have survived, learned, and proven that humans can stand as equals in this galaxy. Our work is not finished, but we have taken the first steps toward a future where courage, intelligence, and unity matter more than power alone." Humanity's victories, small yet significant, inspired the galaxy. Other civilizations began to question their loyalty to the Zalari, and whispers of resistance grew louder. Humans were no longer isolated observers. They were a symbol of defiance, creativity, and hope. Elithar convened his council one final time. "The humans are not gods, and yet they surpass our expectations in ways we cannot predict. We have underestimated them. And now we must consider, can we coexist with a species that refuses to kneel?" The answer, even for Elithar, was uncertain. But one truth was clear. Humans had earned a place among the stars not by divine power, but by courage, intelligence, and will. As humans celebrated quietly on Vera, Reyna gazed at the twin moons. She knew the future held more challenges, more risks, and more discoveries. Yet she felt a quiet confidence. Humanity had proven that it could rise above fear, question authority, and create its destiny. The galaxy had once bowed to gods. Now it would remember humans. Not as subjects, not as pawns, not as curiosities, but as a species that refused to be limited, that thrived on courage and intellect, and that had forever changed the stars. And as the stars shone above, humans looked forward, ready to explore, to learn, and to lead. They had survived the impossible, challenged the divine, and claimed a legacy that would endure across generations. For the first time in history, humans were not just participants in the galaxy. They were its new pioneers, its thinkers, and its champions. The era of unquestioned gods was over. The era of humanity had begun.